everybody, recently I did a bike tour around the Netherlands, and in this video I'll be teaching you how to also set up a trip like that. So last year I found an amazing book that really just opened my eyes to this whole idea of bike touring as a way of traveling. The book is called Bike Touring in Europe. It's kind of an old book from the 80s or 90s, but basically they talk about all these amazing trips you can do in Germany and France, and then also I saw it in the Netherlands. And there's also a lot of YouTubers out there who make videos all about bike touring. And, I've linked some below in the About section of this video. But people like Ryan Van Duzer, Wheels to Wander, Bicycle Touring Pro, these people go all around the world to bike ride. Some of them going literally around the world, some of them going cross countries, some of them just doing short trips abroad. So this got me really inspired to do a trip like this. So the Netherlands has amazing bike infrastructure, both in cities and in between cities. So within cities, everybody commutes to work on bike, everybody just uses bikes to get basically everywhere. Between cities, they actually have detached bike highways, 2-lane paved roads that literally go city to city. In addition, the Netherlands is really flat. It's a perfect place for your first big bike tour. How to set up a trip. So I wanted to keep my trip as easy as possible. So I picked 3 cities in the Netherlands, all on a loop. So my trip had 3 legs. The first one was from Amsterdam to The Hague. The next step was from The Hague to Utrecht. And then finally back to Amsterdam from Utrecht. So I recommend for your first trip, you want to make it as easy as possible, doing a loop around a country, keeping the distances pretty short, less than 50 miles. So once you decide you're going to do a trip, I highly recommend looking at Kiwi.com to look for flights. Kiwi is really amazing in the way that you can give them a certain number of days that you're looking to take a trip, and it'll find the cheapest flight for that duration. You can also tell Kiwi to look at a certain month and find X amount of days within that month, and it'll find the cheapest flight for you. Disclaimer, I do not recommend buying from Kiwi. Given that it's still a third party and they're buying the tickets for you from the airline, I recommend just going straight to the airline. So once you decide what dates you want to go on your trip, buy directly from the airlines, and then if there's any change with the airlines, you won't get stuck with a headache with going through a third party, potentially losing your ticket, and then having to rebook, which has happened to me in the past. Once you get your flight, you have your itinerary ready to go, you need to start looking at accommodations. So for me, I highly prefer going to hostels when I travel. It's just a really easy way to meet people from around the world, to meet locals who will work at the hostel, and have a springboard to basically be social on your trip. Typically in a hostel you'll be in a room with between 4 and 8 beds, so you will be sharing a room with people and maybe a communal bathroom. So if that's not for you, you can always go to hotels. It's just going to be a little more expensive. Also, what's really great about hostels is they typically provide kitchens, so you can always cook for yourself and save money that way. They'll typically provide 1 or 2 meals a day, sometimes for a fee, sometimes it's included with the hostel booking. To get a hostel, I usually go to hostelworld.com. It's super easy. It'll show you all the possible hostels in the area. Typically the hostels are always in the center of the city. For food, I prefer to get groceries. To me, it's the most cost-effective way to get the most amount of food, and typically I don't even go to restaurants that often. So during my bike tours, I would get pastries, bread, cold cuts, cheese, pre-made sandwiches, anything to keep my calories up, like ice cream and chocolates and cookies. So there's definitely a lot of options if you go the grocery route to get food. If you do not plan on getting data while you're abroad, you'll need an app to help you navigate throughout your travels. So I prefer to use Maps.me. That's what I used on my trip to the Netherlands. Basically, you just download the map and it'll give you turn-by-turn directions to and from your destination. And saved on your phone is the entire map of the area, so any points of interest will be saved on the map itself. Other apps you can use are Komoot or Google Maps if you do decide to get data. Lastly, before you do this trip, I highly recommend doing practice bike rides. Right, so either on a stationary bike or a normal bike, just starting small, starting with a couple miles, working your way up to 10 miles, a 20-mile bike ride, and then at least one bike ride that'll be your maximum distance. So for me, my maximum distance in the Netherlands, city to city, was 45 miles. So I practiced doing a single bike ride at 45 miles just to make sure that I understood how to pace myself and make sure I could do that kind of bike ride. So at this point, you have your route, you have your maps, you've booked your flight, you've also booked your accommodations, whether it's a hostel or a hotel. And now it's time to start thinking about how you're going to transport your bike to and from your destination. So personally, I was going to bring my personal bike, disassemble it, put it in a box, and ship it over via the airline. After thinking about it though, I decided it would be much easier to just rent a bike in the Netherlands. So the company I rented from was called abikes.eu, the link is down below. And it was a lot easier to just go and rent it, avoid taking all the risk or the hassle of trying to disassemble my bike and ship it via an airline. If you do want to ship it via an airline, there's plenty of videos on YouTube. Down below are a couple links for doing so. But once again, it does carry a cost, and then there's also a little bit of risk involved with it too. The next important thing to think about is gear. So shown here is all my gear that I brought on this trip. So I had 2 waterproof bike bags or pannier bags. I brought a poncho, a GoPro, phone holder. I had a waterproof phone holder. You can see here I didn't really bring that many clothes, but depending on how much storage you have in your bags, you can bring more. I tend to pack as light as possible, so if you prefer to bring more bags, you can. You can always strap on your handlebars, on your bike frame. I also brought 1 fanny pack. This is super important when you want to just carry a lot of stuff during the day but don't have the pocket space, or if you don't have a backpack available. I only brought 1 pair of shoes, which just made it as easy as possible to pack and just made my life a lot simpler. Also, I brought a hammock, and I also brought a backup battery charger. Just in case, I also brought bike tools, and I have 1 microfiber towel. So here are my top 5 tips to having a successful bike tour. So number 1, make sure you get waterproof gear. I cannot stress how important this is. So both of my bike bags are waterproof, and I have a waterproof phone case, and then as well I brought a rain poncho. This ended up being critical during my bike tour, since the last leg between Utrecht and Amsterdam, it rained basically the whole time, as well as when I was in Amsterdam, it rained about half the time I was there. So obviously if I did not have the waterproof gear, all my stuff would have gotten ruined, my phone would have gotten ruined, I would have gotten really wet, it would have been miserable, and then my clothes and everything in my bags would have gotten wet. So I highly recommend getting waterproof gear. Down below are links of items that I bought for my tour, and I recommend them. Pro tip number 2, make sure you get the app called WhatsApp. I don't think this is as common in the US of people using WhatsApp, but around the world everybody uses WhatsApp. It's basically an app where you can text and call via just Wi-Fi, and it connects to your normal number. And the reason why this is really important is because you're going to be meeting people from all around the world, and you're going to want to stay in touch while you're there, and then even after you're going to want to stay in touch and with all the new friends that you made. So it makes it really easy to make plans. If you meet someone at a hostel and then you want to meet up later, you can always text them via WhatsApp, and it makes it so much easier. Pro tip number 3, highly recommend getting a backup battery. So when you're on these long bike trips between cities, it might take 7 or 8 hours. And sometimes that will be longer than your phone's battery life. And you absolutely do not want to lose battery life while you're on your bike tour. It's just, you're in a different country, you're in the middle of nowhere, and navigating is going to be impossible without it. So with a backup battery, You can always recharge your phone in the middle of your trip or while you're biking, and you can be assured that you'll be able to make it the whole way. Pro tip number 4, I highly recommend bringing a hammock on your trip. I bring this everywhere I go when I travel. It's the perfect way to just take a rest, literally anywhere there's 2 trees, and take a book out, take a nap, whatever you want to do. And especially when you're along these long bike tours, you really want to take breaks during the day. And the best way to do it is in a hammock. Pro tip number 5. So always make sure that you budget enough time for your bike trips between cities. So on your app, your navigation app, it might tell you it might be 4 or 5 hours to get to the next city, but obviously taking rest, taking detours, stopping for breaks and lunch, it's going to add up. And so your bike tour that was supposed to be 5 hours might end up being 8 or 9 hours, just going at a leisurely pace and all that. So when I was on my trip, I left the hostel in the morning around 8 to 8:30 and then started my bike tour. It would take around 7 or 8 hours to get to the next city. So always make sure you're budgeting enough time for your trip. So lastly is the budget. So this is going to vary depending on your travel style, whether you decide to use hotels, or you decide to go out to eat food, and also when you're traveling, in terms of the flight prices. So in total, the flight cost $540. 9 nights at hostels cost $280. Food was $150, and now this was almost exclusively just getting groceries. I probably went to restaurants maybe 1 or 2 times. Finally, renting the bike and getting bike insurance was a total of $150. So in total, the trip cost about $1,120. And like I said, this can vary depending on your travel style. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. Down below in the description are all of the links to the websites, products, and apps that I use for my trip. I hope all the information in this video was helpful in helping you prepare for your big bike tour. Thank you.